Hey guys, just gonna put a quick video together on working with files in PHP. So essentially, there's two main types of functions in PHP when we're dealing with file systems and files. This video is going to touch on the file functions not working with a file resource, which we'll get into streams also in the next video. But in this video, we're strictly concentrating on putting data into a file, um, getting that data through different methods, and also working with um, an array as well when we're dealing with the actual file method. And so how we're going to do this video is I've set up a little sign up form, and essentially when we put data into this form, it's going to be written to a file, and then it can be outputted through the various methods that we're going to be going through. So we have our file, and what we want to do first is make sure that we have something to write into. So I've placed a text file within the exact same directory as my PHP file, which you can do as well. So work. So what good best practices is checking if the file actually exists first before actually running anything. So the one we have is file.txt. And so if this file actually doesn't exist, or say file not found, data cannot be written, and then we're going to actually end the script. So just completely return, and if it does exist, it'll continue running. So I mean, we could flip this and say if the file exists and then run the rest of our script here, but I like avoiding else if statements and using a single condition as opposed to multiple. So right away, if that file doesn't exist, it'll just exit out and give us that error message. And then if it does exist, we'll just do for now, I'll say hello. Okay, so we do have it. So currently we should see that success message. There you go. And if we're looking for something else, for example, FIFO, as you can see, it doesn't exist in this directory, and we should see an error message. Okay, it's always good to have those checks there. Now what we can do is within this form here, we're using a post method. So what we're saying here is if you get a post request, we want to actually use the file put contents method, which accepts a file name, which we're going to use file.txt, and we're going to write into it the data that's posted, which we have the name index and the email index. So let's quickly create some variables. So let's say name equals post name and email equals post email. And so let's put into this file, put a line that says name space email, and we'll also create a new line character, which will create a new line in the file, which we'll see in a second. So yeah, so if we press submit, we'll generate a post request. Since the file does exist, it's going to go into here, and we're going to put contents into file.text. So let's save that. Let's put bob at bob.com. Okay, so on this end we don't see anything, but if we go to file.text, we can now see the name and bob at bob.com. Now if we run that again in the browser, Gary at gary.com, we're going to write once again, but as you can see, our previous bob at bob.com has been overridden. So the file put contents function also has specific flags. So actually, if we get to file put contents, we have 3 flags that are specified, and so we're going to use the file append flag. So it's going to append the data to the file instead of overwriting it. So what we can do now is after the data, so we have our file name, our data, file name data, and then we're going to do file append. So now when we actually write Rob, so now we have multiple data entries. So that quickly covers writing into a file. Now if we want to receive that data, we can do a actually let's start with file get contents. So essentially it's going to store the data in a variable, and then we can output that variable. So we'll do file equals file get contents with our file name, which is file.text. So because this doesn't output anything, so we've assigned that data to this variable, and when we reload this, we won't see anything yet until we actually output that variable. And it outputs is actually to output a string, which you'll see in the documentation. So if we echo that, it's going to output the contents of that file. There you go. And since it doesn't recognize the new line break, it's just going to be formatted that way as a single string in the browser. Now instead of doing this and assigning a variable, if you just want to output the contents right away and not store that data anywhere, you can actually just use readfile, which is going to do the exact same thing. Nothing's changed. It's just going to read the contents and output it. So yeah, unless you want to store it and then play around with that data, parse it further, you can go ahead and do that. Lastly, let's look at the file function. So the file function is actually going to return every, actually let's go to php.net quick. So reads an entire file into an array, okay, with each so each element in the array corresponds to a line in the file. So in this case, this will be displayed as an element. This will be displayed as an element. So what we can do is file. So again, we're assigned that. So this is now an array. So outputting an array, we know we can't use echo. Let's do human mutable format, print our file. So now we have element number 1 or 0, Gary, and then Rob. And if we add another one, we now have Tom as well. So now if we want to output this data in a prettier format, let's say, for example, a table, we can do that pretty easily. So because I don't want this to extend too much longer, I'm actually just gonna paste, I'm gonna cheat here and paste some stuff I put together earlier. Okay, so what we have here is the exact same variable as we had before, where each line is represented by this array. We're creating a table. Okay, so now we're taking what we had before, so each line is represented by one of these. Okay, and we want to actually take that string, which is the row. So actually, okay, let's not do all this at first. This can be actually pretty confusing. Okay, so the first time around, that output's going to give us this data. Okay, so for example, we have Gary and Gary at Gary.com. So let's just put that up here. Okay, so now what we're going to do with this string is we're going to actually take this string and explode it at the space. What explode does is it actually takes a string and puts that string into an array. So now we're going to split up Gary and Gary.com. Okay? And then from that we create a row. And now that we have an array of Gary and Gary at Gary.com, we can do another for each and then put that data into that row and then the row. So this, when this goes through once, it's going to output the Gary at Gary.com, and then it's going to do the exact same thing for everything else. Sorry if that was confusing, guys. If you have any additional questions about this, just ask me, but just play around with it and it gets pretty simple. Okay, and so now when we output this, we have a nice little list of the data. Okay, so again, the more we add, the nicer our table gets, and you can continue to format that. And so the purpose of this, again, just explain these file functions, writing data, and also reading data from a file. In the next video, we're going to go over file resources and streams. And yeah, so this, again, this isn't very practical, guys. If you're using a very small website and you want to output this data and not use a database, you can certainly do something like this. I wouldn't recommend it, but just for practicing purposes and using the file methods, definitely play around with this and get used to it because it can be beneficial. Okay, thanks, guys.